like we never left. It's Double Move Sports. As always, I'm Stef Burrow. I'm here with the fantasy phenom, Alex Lott. Say what's up to the people. We're almost halfway through the season.
It's crazy.
It's been a hell of a ride so far.
Look, if you told me we were making it to, what are we going into week 8, and the season hasn't been canceled or no games have been canceled, it's a huge win for all of us. So I'm hyped to be halfway through the season, hyped that we're here. I wish it would slow down a little bit. It always goes by so fast. But Steph, me and you have a big one this week in our home league. Going head-to-head. Luckily, you got some bye weeks, but it's going to be a good one. We're both in playoff standing right now, so it's kind of a must-win for both of us trying to get towards the top of the standings for that regular season title. Hyped to be going against you this week. May the best man win.
Hey, it's going to be a grind. We're going to be clawing, scratching tooth and nail, just trying to get this dub. I had some interesting decisions to make flex-wise with some streamer plays. It's the bipocalypse, man. Chark, Brandon Cooks, David Johnson. So we'll see how it goes here. And let's talk about these bye weeks. I mean, we're 7 weeks in. We're coming up on week 8. This is the part of the season where you're trying to see what side of the hump are you on. Are you a team that's firmly in the playoffs, just trying to gear up for that end of the year? Are you a team that's on the bubble that needs to win right now? And you're sweating if you're a 1 or 2 win team. You need to get some wins ASAP. And we got bye weeks for the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Houston Texans, the Arizona Cardinals, and the Washington football team. As always, if you like what we do here on the show, please hit that subscribe button. That is huge for us. A like is always appreciated as well. If you have start-sit questions, you can hit us up down in the comments below or hit us up on Twitter.
We try to get back on all those. We try to get back to people on all of those. We try to get it before game time. Always happy to jump in and help you with those. So don't be afraid to throw it in the comments. Don't think, oh, they're never going to answer. We really do. Test it out. I promise you. We'll do our best, and I think we're hitting most of them.
I feel like we're at like 99% right now. There's been a few that have slipped on like waiver nights and stuff like that, but I feel like we're hitting most of them. But it's fun, and hopefully we can get some live streams going again as well. But Alex, let's jump into some of these topics. This first one, it had to be done. We had so much fun with this one in the offseason when the season was starting with this Tampa Bay Buccaneers running back room. Leonard Fournette is back, and everyone who's been watching this show for any period of time knows how big of a Rojo truther you are. So as someone who's on the Rojo side of this, I'm more on the Fournette side. We'll get into a little bit of the takes here, but how scared should Rojo managers be? How scared are you, Alex, for a guy who has Rojo in a lot of places?
Rojo's been a roller coaster ride, and Steph, we said we're going to be talking about this backfield all year long, and for either of their fantasy football case, that wasn't going to be a good thing. And it's tough because, I'm down on Rojo. Fournette misses a couple games, and I'm riding this wave of the 3 straight 100-yard games. He's looking great. He's doing better in the passing game. I think he's established this backfield, and then Fournette just comes out of nowhere and gets 55% snaps to Rojo's 44%, even though Rojo did technically get the start. And it just makes no sense to me. And Steph, you texted me during the game, Fournette is getting a lot of work. And it took me a couple hours to reply because I had to cool off before I was able to reply to you because I know you've got Fournette in a couple places. But it was weird. And, it's back to that point where for me, Rojo is back to a low-end RB2. He's going to get, 12 to 15 carries and might get a target or 2 per game. And Fournette is in high-end RB3 territory for me just because he is getting that passing work. One thing that was interesting in this game is, we've seen Rojo and Fournette split time earlier in the year, but McCoy was coming in on passing downs and getting a handful of touches and targets. McCoy and Keyshawn Vaughn did not play in this game. So this was a 2-man split. And with a Bucs team that is firing on all cylinders right now, if it's just the two of them, you might actually get fantasy value out of both. It's just not going to be, that league-winning upside that you want out of either guy.
Ronald Jones, 44% of snaps, 13 carries for 34 yards, had a touchdown. Only saw 2 targets in this game, so a 10 fantasy point outing from Rojo. And then Leonard Fournette, coming off of an inactive game and an emergency active the week prior, 55% of snaps, 11 carries, 50 yards, and then had 7 targets. Caught 6 of those for 47 yards, a 15 fantasy point outing from Leonard Fournette. So in this week, if you threw Leonard Fournette in there, which I doubt anyone did, how disrespected do you feel right now if you're Ronald Jones? They go to Fournette after 3 back-to-back 100-plus rushing yard games. that is a major red flag for Rojo shareholders. They're not willing to give Rojo the reins of this backfield, even when it feels like he's pulling away from the pack. So I see a window now for Fournette to take over, specifically with the high-value touches. And we look at another backfield that is also a two-man committee with Melvin Gordon and Phillip Lindsay. And it's just felt like, look, Gordon is just the clear guy that you want in fantasy because he's getting the passing work. He's more likely to get goal line carries. I think they trust Fournette more in pass protection as well, which gets him on the field in those passing down situations. So, like you said, right, this Bucs defense and offense really is just firing on all cylinders. They're a top 3 defense. They're only allowing 291 yards of total offense per game. Of the two right now, I lean Fournette, but ideally you could sell either of them for more stable running back. They have a great upcoming schedule, though, and that's the thing.
It's closer than I'd like to admit. And, Steph, like you said, that great upcoming schedule, I know the Giants are on there. The Panthers both could have great games. But the thing is, like, Fournette, what I noticed in this game, Fournette would come onto the field on third downs. And that was super frustrating because, like you said, that passing volume is so valuable. So Fournette would come in on a third down, but he wouldn't come back out for Rojo to go in on the next first down if they picked it up. He'd come in. If they converted the first down, he stayed on the field, and it felt like he played the rest of the drive. So for me, I noticed that happen several times, not every time, but enough to where a huge red flag went off for me, and it does seem like they favor Rojo on the goal line, but it's not like Rojo is this goal line back, and when they get down inside the 5, they're going to rush him on the field. Fournette was in on a goal line possession where Tom Brady snuck it in from the 1. So Fournette potentially could get, a third of that goal line work to Rojo's 2/3. So it's not like one is, just the primary goal line back and one is the primary receiving back. It's a lot closer than I'd like to admit. Luckily, Rojo can get a little bit of work in the passing game as well, and Fournette might get touchdown opportunities here and there. But, man, it's tough. And personally, I'm a little bit biased. I thought Rojo looked a lot better. Fournette had a couple big plays, but to me, he looked a little bit slow when he got out in the open field. But that's kind of splitting hairs at this point. I'm fine to roll either out as an RB2 or a flex this week. And if either has a good game here against the Giants, it could be a time to potentially sell high because my big takeaway is, barring injury, I don't think either Fournette or Ronald Jones is going to be able to pull away from the other and kind of dominate this backfield as a workhorse.
If you can sell high, and especially if you're a team that needs to win now.
Maybe even right now.
Yeah, if you need to win right now, go ahead and sell Fournette or Rojo for as much as you possibly can. Even if it's a slight downgrade from a guy that you would think of, from a projection or rankings perspective, get a more stable option because I think these guys are both going to swing back and forth, and you're never really going to know when to start them. And real quickly on the red zone touches here, Ronald Jones had 3 red zone touches on the ground, and so did Leonard Fournette. The difference is Leonard Fournette also had 1 red zone touch through the air as well. So they're about dead even there. So like you said, it's not like a clear role that's been defined for either one of these backs. Now, if you are a team that is chilling there with a winning record, after the Week 13 bye, this late bye week that the Buccaneers have, the schedule is fantastic. Vikings, Falcons, Lions in Week 14, 15, 16, and the fantasy football playoffs. So if you need to, again, with this defense, setting up these positive game scripts, I think both of these guys will have startable weeks. We're not saying fade either one. It's just going to be tough to know whose week it really is. But Fournette is a guy that I think could take over as much as it hurts to say after that Rojo explosion that we saw.
Steph, next I want to talk about a couple of rookie quarterbacks, and I know we do have Tua coming this week, but first, Justin Herbert, man. I didn't see this coming. He's had an absolute explosion, and, I'm not saying he's Patrick Mahomes. I don't want to put him on that pedestal yet, but he feels like he could be someone that's like the next Mahomes. I mean, when I watch this guy play, he's chilling in the pocket. He has a great presence. He's mobile, and he's just launching the ball downfield. And when I remember Mahomes' first season as a starter, I remember this dude with a cannon that seemed like he was taking deep shots. He was accurate. He was mobile. So I've loved watching Justin Herbert, and he's tied for 3rd in the NFL in yards per attempt. And typically we look at these rookie quarterbacks, they do these safe checkdowns, keep it near the line of scrimmage, don't dwell under pressure. But Justin Herbert's been an absolute blast this season. How are you valuing Justin Herbert rest of season? And at this point, is he someone you're willing to start every single week? I mean, he's 4th in the NFL right now in fantasy points per game with 25.8, actually more than Patrick Mahomes. So to me, I'm fine to lock him in regardless of matchup. What's your take on Herbert?
Yeah, he's a QB1. To me, he's in that mid to low end QB1 range. Rest of season, Does have this Denver matchup, but doesn't get me super excited. You add in the fact that, it is at Denver, which we saw last week when the Chiefs were there. That snow game, the weather kind of affected how much they can air the ball out. But Herbert gives you a sneaky rushing floor as well. I think the comps to Josh Allen I put out a tweet a while ago after Herbert had his breakout game. I was like, my comp for Justin Herbert was Josh Allen, but it was 2018 Josh Allen. And now it looks like both Josh Allen and Justin Herbert are 2020 Josh Allen. So it's come full circle at this point. And the efficiency, an adjusted completion percentage of 74%. That's 11th in the league. Like you said, that yards per attempt number, extremely high. He's just willing to air the ball out, and he's accurate while he's doing that, really not throwing to any big weapons outside of Keenan Allen. I know Mike Williams is there. He's always been kind of this boom-bust guy, kind of knows his role and stays there, but he's throwing 70-yard touchdown passes to Jalen Guyton. Just to see what he's doing has just been really fun to see. And, to start the year with Tyrod Taylor, this Chargers team was a very run-heavy team. We were seeing both Eckler and Josh Kelly be in the double-digit carry range on a weekly basis and both be startable running backs. Now, as Herbert's come in, the Chargers went from one of the lowest in the league on pass plays per game. Now they're sitting at number 11. So you look at the changes to this offense based on the personnels. You love to see it. And for a guy just 5 weeks into his career to be at number 4 in the league in fantasy points per drop back is just incredible. Like, the efficiency has been insane. He's been great under pressure. He has a 54% pressure completion percentage, which is 4th among all quarterbacks right now. So what more can you say about Herbert? If you grabbed him off waivers before he exploded, like we were telling you to.
Like you did.
Right after he had that boom game, I've been plugging him in over Cam Newton. It's kind of saved my QB spot. You got to start Justin Herbert right now. Treat him as a QB1.
Yeah, I mean, I do expect some slight regression between now and the end of the year, but I'm not saying like he's going to fall off a map and be a typical rookie quarterback. I think, he could be somewhere around QB 8 to 12. Now, like we said, he's 4th in fantasy points per game at the position. I don't think that holds. But Steph, right now, you talk about efficiency. His passer rating is 108.1. Now, Phillip Rivers was the full-time starter for the Chargers for 14 seasons. Do you know how many seasons he had a 108 passer rating?
Probably not many with all those interceptions.
Zero. And it's not like it's some difference in efficiency, because Herbert's 16-game pace right now is 4,900 yards and 38 touchdowns, plus 400 yards and 6 touchdowns on the ground. Again, it's a smaller sample size. I don't expect that to come to fruition. I expect some slight regression, but he's still someone you can throw out there every single week. He's absolutely blown away all my expectations, and we said it. For all these other options and these weapons in the offense, Keenan Allen, man, he's a locked-in wide receiver 1 rest of season, something we did not expect at all with Tyrod Taylor at quarterback. I would expect Hunter Henry to hopefully take some steps forward as well. He's still someone you're obviously starting every week at the tight end position. And these other guys like Mike Williams, we've seen pops. And I can only imagine what Austin Eckler would be doing in this offense if he had stayed healthy. If you have Eckler on your roster and you make the playoffs, you might get a couple weeks there of Eckler and Herbert together. That will be fun to watch as well this season. But Steph, let's go ahead and move on to the guy nobody really doubted. It was Joe Burrow. He's absolutely dealing this season. What do you like out of him so far in Cincinnati? It's been tremendous to watch him support 3 different wide receiver options on, many different weeks. He's leading the league in pass attempts. Joe Burrow's lived up to the hype for me. What do you think he's going to be moving forward for fantasy?
It's crazy, too, because you look at the difference between Herbert and Burrow. These guys are on complete opposite ends of the spectrum. You think of Justin Herbert as like, I'm not comping him there, but you think of him as like a Mahomes, run around, air it out. He's going to get some rushing bonus stuff in there. Joe Burrow is kind of the opposite, where, and he has been good from a rushing perspective, but it's not like the arm strength. He's not taking these deep shots downfield. He's really been more of a kind of calculated, let me pick apart this defense, take what they give me type of player. And it's just that volume. That's what you love to see, that passing volume for especially a rookie quarterback. I think we were all pretty conservative with our projections. We said prior to the draft, we said if when Joe Burrow's on the Bengals, if they can hit maybe 600 pass attempts, he's going to be a fantasy asset. And right now he's on pace to hit 670 pass attempts, which would have led the league last year over Jameis Winston. And over the last 5 years, the only guys to pass this pace that Burrow is on, the 670 pass attempt pace, would be 2018 Big Ben, which we saw what happened to his elbow the next year.
Yikes.
And then 2016 Drew Brees and Joe Flacco. That was the times when those defenses were just completely crumbling and those guys had to air it out a ton. So you look over the last 5 years, what Joe Burrow's doing is historic. 42 pass attempts per game, and with Joe mixing out, this Bengals offense is going to have to rely on Joe Burrow even more. He's been a sneaky rushing guy. He's had 3 rushing touchdowns on the year to start his career. He's only had 1 truly disappointing fantasy start, and it was against Baltimore where you're probably sitting him anyway. So even if it's garbage time, Burrow's going to be putting up points. He was a guy that we said grab him in those double-digit rounds in your draft because we could see the upside from a guy like this coming in, and I don't think anyone expected this type of volume, but it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully Mixon's back this week. We'll see. Still not practicing. So, I think as of this recording, the expectation is he will be out this week. They have the bye next weekend to bring him back after that, but keep an eye on it. But you're right. He's going to have to keep airing it out, and it's to Higgins, Boyd, and A.J. Green. And all these guys are start-worthy right now in fantasy football. They're all seeing around 80% of snaps. It's kind of like a 3-way timeshare there in Cincinnati. And you think about them, they're all very different players. Tyler Boyd is more of a safe, high floor play. Right now he's getting 9 targets a game. He's really over-indexed in the touchdown category, and he's a top 10 receiver in PPR, which is crazy. So you're rolling him out every single week.
Nice.
You've got T. Higgins, who's more of the upside, league winner, late rookie breakout, like A.J. Brown last year type of player. Right now he's still a wide receiver 3, though, with upside on a week in and week out basis. In his last 6 games, 7 targets a game, over 15 yards per catch. This guy's getting it done, and Burrow is getting him the ball early and often in games. I mean, Higgins is making plays all over the field. And then even A.J. Green, there's that Undertaker gif where he comes out of the grave and sits up. That's A.J. Green. We might have to throw that in here if we can, Stef. But he seemed like he was dead and gone. But he's back. Last 2 games, 84% of snaps, 12 targets a game. I don't know if they're trying to showcase him before the trade deadline or what. But he's back, and until further notice, you can throw him in your flex. It's a little bit riskier because he has been up and down, but you can't deny the production and the targets and the snaps. So the fact that a rookie quarterback is supporting 3 fantasy-relevant wide receivers on a bad team only adds up to be able to start that quarterback in fantasy football. So I'm in on starting Joe Burrow. I mean, in a tough matchup, maybe there's a better streamer available, but he's going to continue to deal. And, he's 3rd in the NFL in passing yards, but he's way down the list in passing touchdowns. I think he's in the 20s. So there has to be some positive regression coming there for Joe Burrow in terms of passing touchdowns. So keep an eye out for that as well.
You love it. You got to love what Joey Burrows is doing right now in Cincinnati. But let's talk about some running back start sits. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of them right now. A lot of guys.
It gets tougher and tougher every week, man.
A lot of guys on the bubble. We got injuries. We got bye weeks. The bye weeks knocked out a lot of our safe options like James Robinson, like David Johnson, even some options like Antonio Gibson. So we're getting deeper and deeper. And then we're seeing Chris Carson get injured last week. Phillip Lindsay's in concussion protocol. And injuries left and right just keep hitting for these RBs. So fantasy managers need to know how to treat these backfields. And there's a couple of them that we want to talk about here that are kind of these ambiguous backfields where there's a couple different options. Let's go through some of these. The first one is in San Francisco. I don't even know what's happening. There's nothing to even say here. There's no analytic metric that we can look at that's going to tell us who to start on a weekly basis. And right now it seems like it's between Jerick McKinnon, JaMychal Hasty, Tevin Coleman could be back. He was activated off of IR, but no guarantee he's going to play against Seattle here in week 8. Alex, who do you like out of these guys?
Dude, this is crazy. If possible, I'm trying to avoid San Francisco because the writing on the wall was there for Jerick McKinnon last week. I mean, I started him in a couple leagues, and he came back with negative fantasy points. I think it was 3 carries for -1 yards, and it made no sense. All game, I'm like, did I miss a play and he left for the game? Is he inactive? Did he get disciplined? And then Kyle Shanahan comes out after the game, and all he says is oh, yeah, we were just trying to rest him. That would have been great to know beforehand, Kyle. But, I just can't trust him at this point. And if I'm going to start anyone, honestly, it's going to be JaMychal Hasty, which sounds a little bit crazy, but I think he is the one that's guaranteed for a role in the offense this week. Like Jerick McKinnon is clearly not going to come in and have some sort of bell cow work like Jeff Wilson did last week with no one coming in behind him. Tevin Coleman, even if he's active, I don't expect him to just come out and get 20 carries after coming off of IR and being questionable throughout the week. So I think JaMychal Hasty is probably the best bet for some sort of workload if you're desperate. But if possible, I'm trying to stay away from all these guys.
I'm with you on Hasty, especially if Coleman doesn't play. But yeah, I mean, throw the GIF on screen right now. Mark Cuban saying, I'm out in the Shark Tank for JaMychal Hasty. Like 23% of snaps, 8.3 fantasy points. If that's your best option in a backfield, you probably don't want any of them. And at this point, like I'm willing to say Shanahan running back rooms, at least for the rest of this year, probably going into next year's drafts. Like I'm just not going to touch any of them outside of maybe Raheem Mostert, and he's going to be a year older next season. Hopefully he comes back and healthy off IR because I think that's the only guy that you can actually trust to start in fantasy. Let's talk about another running back here, La'Mical Pirine for the New York Jets. Kind of stepping up into a workhorse role. He's up against Kansas City, which is middle of the road against the running back position. I'm willing to throw La'Mical Pirine in there as a desperation RB2 this week, maybe even a flex. Do you think that's a hot take?
I mean, desperate times call for desperate measures, Steph. And like with Pirine, sadly, I think I might play him over all the San Francisco running backs just because of the uncertainty. And here's the thing. A San Francisco running back will outscore La'Mical Pirine this week. Maybe two of them will. I just don't know who it's going to be. So I'm taking La'Mical Pirine even though he's on a bad offense. I mean, the Jets, they're going to score a maximum of 10 points per game. So the touchdown upside isn't there, although he did have one last game. But he's getting some red zone carries. He's getting most of the passing work on that team over Frank Gore. It's really just him and Frank Gore in that backfield right now. And against the Chiefs, I expect them to get absolutely boat raced in this game. I think the line is like 20 points or something like that. So Pirine's going to be out there. And although Darnold doesn't check down to the running back a ton, who knows that, if Pirine can get 10 to 12 carries and 5 or 6 targets in this game, even if the production isn't there, the volume could be enough to make him a flex play. So again, I'm fading if I can, but with some of these injuries, with some of the bye weeks, with some of these crazy backfields that we're seeing, I'm fine to roll Pirine out there, and it doesn't feel good.
70% of snaps last week, 13.6 fantasy points, 11 attempts for 40 rushing yards, a brutal 3.6 yards per attempt. So like you're saying, the production here, unless you get a touchdown, which, I mean, Pirine had 3 red zone carries, so it looks like, it's not Frank Gore cramming up the middle anymore. And if there is going to be receiving work to be had, that's going to go to Pirine as well. So I see him as a low-end RB2, just as a volume play on this bad offense. If the Jets improve at all, I don't think they're going to fire Gase. They would have already done it if they were going to this season. But if whatever happens, maybe the personnel changes, the scheme changes, whatever, like there's nowhere to go for this Jets offense but up. So in that case, for a guy that, even if you don't have to start him, keep him stashed on your bench. I think he's a fine bye-week filler or a deep flex.
So next on the list, Steph, another split backfield. I think some of the themes here with our start sits this week are some of these split backfields, and we've talked about like Darrell Henderson and Malcolm Brown a lot in the past. So we're trying to hit on some of these new ones that are starting to pop up left and right, and this one's Justin Jackson and Josh Kelly. Another backfield that's been incredibly tough to read. Without Eckler that first week, Justin Jackson seemed to lead the backfield. But then last week, Josh Kelly, 47% of snaps and 17 touches, to Jackson's 38% of snaps and only 10 touches. They're playing the Denver Broncos, who are a little bit stingy against the running back position. Steph, Kelly and Jackson, if you had them as your RB2 or your flex last week, neither popped off, but they got the job done. Both had over 10 PPR fantasy points. Are you willing to roll out either of them this week or potentially both?
I've tried not to start Kelly with every fiber of my being, just because he's been the between the tackles grinder type of guy in that offense.
Without a touchdown, it's pretty tough for him to put up a worthy performance, that's for sure.
Exactly. I mean, 47% of snaps, that was more than Justin Jackson. Well, I'll talk about him in a second. 17 touches last week, 12 for 29 rushing. Like, that's just a brutal rushing efficiency. And I think that's going to continue in a blizzard game against Denver, which is third against running backs. He did see some receiving volume, this is where the interesting upside lies for Joshua Kelly. 5 for 5 for 24 receiving yards. If you're going to start him, that's what you have to circle and say, look, I'm going to expect for that receiving volume to be there again. The thing is, the Chargers are coming off a game against Jacksonville, which actually turned into a little bit of a shootout. I don't expect that same game script to occur here against Denver. I think the Chargers will be able to stifle them a little bit more on the defensive side. And so with that, I'm going to go Justin Jackson if I have to pick one of the two. I was already leaning that way because Justin Jackson is proven to be Austin Eckler light. Only played 38% of snaps. He was banged up in the week last week, so they didn't. I felt like they were trying to limit his touches a little bit. Had 5 for 12 rushing, but had one more target than Joshua Kelly. He had 6, caught 5 of them for 43 yards. So also saw more efficiency in the receiving game as well. And that just is part of his profile. That's who he is. He can definitely play more of a scat back or third down back than Joshua Kelly can. I'm taking Justin Jackson in this game, trying to sit Joshua Kelly, but really don't feel great about either one of them against Denver.
Yeah, I agree with you. And to that point, though, like compared to LaMichael Pirine, Jerick McKinnon, JaMychal Hasty, even Tevin Coleman, I think I might still rather have either Justin Jackson or Josh Kelly. You might disagree with me there, but I'm with you. If I had to go with one, I'm going with Jackson because with Kelly, you're essentially relying on a touchdown. And with Justin Jackson, I think the floor is safer with that passing game work. So if I had to pick, it's going to be Jackson. But again, desperate times call for desperate measures. So I'm willing to flex either of them in a pinch and hope for the best.
Let's move over to Buffalo and talk about Zach Moss and Devin Singletary for this Bills running back room. Singletary played 54% of snaps to Zach Moss's 47%. Both had 10 touches, so it was almost a dead even 50-50 split in that backfield. And Moss outproduced Singletary coming back from that injury. I feel like he was kind of getting eased in a little bit, and then we saw some production there. Who are you taking in Week 8 against New England?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's not Devin Singletary. There's no way you can start him right now. I mean, now that Zach Moss is back and healthy, we both liked Zach Moss coming into the season. We didn't know if the breakout was going to happen. We thought it might be a timeshare, but it looks like Zach Moss is truly starting to emerge and really take over this backfield because of those snap counts and touches from last week. And Singletary straight up hasn't been good. You look at his last 3 games from a fantasy points perspective, 4.3, 5.5, and 6.7. Just hasn't been able to get anything going on the ground. And this is a Patriots team that just gave up 4 touchdowns to the running back position against San Francisco. So if I'm going to start one of them, I mean, this might be a hot take, but I think it's going to be Zach Moss. He offers some upside in the receiving game as well. He's the more likely of the two, in my opinion, to be in at the goal line, even though Josh Allen's probably going to keep it on the read option every time or QB sneak it. So the touchdown upside is low, but if I had to pick one of these two guys, I think the pendulum has swung and it's Zach Moss for me.
Now, their last game was against the Jets, so I don't want to overvalue some of that, but if you look at Zach Moss's efficiency on the ground, 6.7 yards per attempt, had 7 carries for 47 yards, to Singletary, who actually had one more attempt, 8, but only had 29 rushing yards, 3.6 yards per attempt there. So Zach Moss is kind of coming in as like, here's the fresh legs. Let me see if I can come in here and take over this backfield. I think there is a small window that is opening for Moss to sneak in here and take over, but as long as this is a 50-50 split, I'd rather start neither of them.
Last one here, Steph, at the running back position. You have this choice this week against me, so I'm not going to show my cards too much, but J.K. Dobbins against the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's a tough one because Ingram is potentially going to be out for this game. And it's like, of course, the one game that Ingram is finally poised to potentially miss or be limited is against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have been absolutely suffocating against the run. Only 68 rushing yards allowed per game. You know Gus Edwards is going to be involved in some way. Lamar Jackson's going to run it as well. J.K. Dobbins against Pittsburgh. Are you firing him up this week, Steph?
I'm not going to answer that question directly in terms of our matchup. I mean, I got to decide between J.K. Dobbins and then DJ Dallas. I'm kind of holding him, seeing how it shakes out with Carlos Hyde and Travis Homer. It's just a tough spot to be in. I really don't want to start him, but I think he has enough of a floor through his receiving to not even be a starter, but just that I would probably plug him in because I think he's going to be in that 8 to 10 point range. I don't think he's going to be efficient on the ground. If you remember against Cincinnati, Dobbins had 1 rushing attempt for 34 yards. So a 34 yard per attempt in that game. Yeah. So that's kind of skewing some of his efficiency metrics. He hasn't looked that great on the ground when he's getting close to double-digit carries, and I don't expect that to explode against Pittsburgh, though I do love Dobbins long-term. I think he can be great. He has been efficient through the air, and that's where all of this is going to come from. If you're starting J.K. Dobbins this week, what you're hoping for is for the Pittsburgh Steelers to go up on this Ravens team and for them to enter comeback mode, have to air it out a little bit more. But the most we've seen from a target perspective for Dobbins is 4 targets. Maybe at absolute most, you're seeing 6 in a game script that lends itself to that. I mean, he was 4 for 4 through the air for 38 yards. Against Kansas City, similar type of game script that we could see here if Pittsburgh really is this undefeated juggernaut that they've been thus far. Coming off the bye week, maybe they look at some of the efficiency and big plays that Dobbins has had throughout the season and try to give him the ball a little bit more with Ingram out. I don't think you can bank on that at all. I think everyone's going to play their role, right? Gus Edwards is going to be the between the tackles grinder, and J.K. Dobbins is going to be more of a scat back, change of pace, breather back. So really, I'd rather start Edwards actually over J.K. Dobbins. Are you with me on that one?
That's a bit of a hot take. I would try to avoid either in this matchup. If you held J.K. Dobbins to this point, it feels like a situation where you should start him. It's just such a tough matchup. We don't know what it's going to look like. We need to see if Ingram plays or not first. But I would rather wait and see. I know you could wait and he could have a good game and Ingram could be back next week, but there's just so much risk involved there. I think a lot of people are going to start him if Ingram is out, but it feels like a trap game to me. I'd love to be proved wrong. You know, me and you love J.K. Dobbins as a talent. We think he's going to have a great career, but I'm going to try to sit him this week if possible.
Coming off that season high 11 touches in week 6, but even 11 touches is just not going to do it. So you think in a best case scenario, maybe he gets a little bit more than that, but still not a guy that you really want to plug in there. If you're looking at it as a flex option, there's probably a wide receiver out on the waiver wire that you can pick up and just plug in for 1 week and stream. Now let's shift over to some wide receivers here. We'll keep it in this Pittsburgh-Baltimore matchup. Should be one of the most fun games on this slate. And for this, we just had a video breaking it down. You can check that out last week where we looked at all of the Pittsburgh Steelers wide receivers, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, Juju Smith-Schuster, and kind of broke down each one of these guys. They're all seeing pretty healthy snap shares, but coming off a game that kind of shook up what we thought this Steelers wide receiver core was going to be. Now, as of right now, Deontay Johnson did not practice. This is on Wednesday when we're recording right now. It's not out of the ordinary for Deontay Johnson to take some maintenance days over the week. He's been one of those guys who's been, if he's questionable, doesn't really matter. All that matters is if he's active on game day. I think you've got to plug him in the lineup because at this point, whenever he's healthy and active and on the field, he's been the Steelers wide receiver 1. And he's been a guy that's extremely viable in fantasy, has been scoring touchdowns. He has 3 so far on the year and is leading the team in targets every time he's out there. So I just don't know what you can do other than, for Chase Claypool and Juju, just hope that Deontay Johnson's not healthy and that Claypool's going to have some explosion.
Yeah, I mean, the 3 games we've seen Deontay fully healthy, he's had 10 targets, 13 targets, and 15 targets. So if he's out there healthy, Deontay Johnson is at the point where I know he's burned you a couple times because he's gotten banged up in games, but you just have to play him because if you didn't, you missed out on games like he had last week, that big 2-touchdown performance. So if Deontay Johnson's healthy, I'm playing him. The 2 more interesting guys to me are Juju Smith-Schuster and Chase Claypool, and Juju feels like he should have a higher floor, but I don't know that he actually does, and Claypool definitely is the higher upside guy, as we saw in his 4-touchdown game. Stef, Juju's coming off that fantastic performance. He's been very up and down this season. I think right now I'm still willing to flex Juju or put him in as my wide receiver 2. We're seeing the Steelers absolutely deal right now. They're the only undefeated team left in football. This game against the Ravens offense is good. I don't expect this to be a blowout either way. So there is going to be a healthy game script for both sides throughout. So I do expect Juju to get enough work in this game to have some fantasy relevancy. The problem is just the target counts for Juju Smith-Schuster don't quite add up to production for me in terms of yards because we're seeing Juju like in a game like last week. How many targets did he have? 14? Let me spot check this. 14
Season
targets,
high.
only 85 yards. Only 85 yards, though. You know what I mean? So That's a little bit concerning to me. Only 5 and 4 targets the games before that. He's always a threat to score. He can make big plays. So, I'm not reading too much into it, but I just want to make sure that everything is good there because you got Claypool and Deontay Johnson, two other really strong weapons. Ebron's getting involved as well. I just don't want there to be, a game where I'm starting Juju and he gets forgotten about like he had the previous couple weeks. So you kind of got to ride the hot hand. You got to ride the snap counts and the targets and the things we're seeing on the field. But with both Juju and Claypool, they've shown that they can kind of burn us. Claypool's game last week, I can't even describe. Don't drop him just yet. Maybe you put him on your bench until he's back in action. We recommended starting him to everybody. We said, look, this is one of those guys. While he's hot, you have to keep starting him. You have to go with the trends. You have to go with what you know. He burned us last week, so we learned a lesson. I'm fine to roll him back out there if you want to, but if possible, I'm trying to leave him on my bench right now to see if he can get things worked out.
It wasn't like they took Claypool off the field either. 65% of snaps. He has at this point shown, if you look at the snap counts, his usage, the routes run, he's taken over as the wide receiver 3 over James Washington. So I think he has a starting role. It's just a matter of, hey, was it really so reliant on Deontay Johnson being out of the lineup for Claypool to have those explosions? What Claypool hasn't been, outside of that one game against Philly where he had the 3 touchdowns, that 42-point outing that he had, he really hasn't been a high target guy, but nonetheless, he's still been producing. So he's a boom bust option. He's probably what, we thought Michael Gallup was earlier in the year. That's kind of what Claypool is now. And it feels like, Claypool is kind of taken all the juice out of Juju and just become, all the explosiveness is now with Claypool, whereas Juju's just floor, almost like a Cole Beasley type of guy who's just this near the line of scrimmage, safe option for Big Ben to check down to when the pressure's coming his way. And in a game where the Baltimore Ravens are going to be sending a ferocious front seven at Big Ben every single play, I don't think there's going to be a lot of time for Chase Claypool to get downfield and get open. On top of that, they have a great secondary, Marcus Peters, Marlon Humphrey. So for those reasons, I'm sitting Chase Claypool and Juju Smith-Schuster this week. But willing to roll them back out later on. The next 3 weeks are fantastic for the Steelers. They have Dallas, Cincinnati, and Jacksonville after this Baltimore game. So it's almost like, hey, just sit them for a week and then pop them right back in there.
Steph, let's move on to someone I've been conflicted about. It's CeeDee Lamb. He's playing the Philadelphia Eagles this week.
Oh, boy.
It's looking like it's going to be Ben DiNucci, Andy Dalton, as of this recording, still in the concussion protocol. So keep an eye on that because I do think Andy Dalton is a big deal over Ben DiNucci. But Steph, CeeDee Lamb coming into this game, top 10 wide receiver on the year in PPR, absolutely dealing, had seen at least 5 receptions and 7 targets in every single game this season. Comes out against Washington, 5 targets, 0 catches, has 1 rush for 1 yard, gave me that 0.1 last week in my lineup. To me,
Sheesh.
I've been as big of a CeeDee Lamb fan this year as possible. You got to put him on your bench, right? I mean, there's no chance. Like, I might have to start him in a league. I've been trying to sell him everywhere, but I think that window is gone. I'll tell you what, you put up a 0-point performance and your value tanks. So it feels like this would be a sell low if I traded him, but I'm just afraid if he has 1 or 2 more bad weeks, his value is going to be out the window.
Yeah, I think you got to hold. You got to hold
and put him on your bench.
Sell him high if you can, but I don't think any fantasy managers are going to buy high on CeeDee in 2020, knowing what that quarterback situation looks like. On top of the 0 for 5 through the air, CeeDee was also off the field a lot. Only played 55% of snaps. That's tied with his lowest on the season. The last time he did that, he had 20 fantasy points though, not 0. So with CeeDee, I know maybe you look at the Eagles and they're 21st against the wide receiver. It could be a decent defense to stream against, but you just can't trust with the quarterback turmoil that's going on back there. You can't trust him at all in your lineup.
Yeah, and I mean
just
the thing
hold,
is,
don't drop.
Yeah, put him on your bench, see what happens. But he did get 1 red zone target actually in the end zone that was very close to being a touchdown. The defender made an incredible play to get back on the ball. So that could have changed the whole narrative of this week. So that 1 touchdown could have turned things around. I think the snap count was low because this game was out of hand and they kind of pulled their starters at the end because they were just trying to get home. So, I'm not reading too much into that. But if Ben DiNucci's the starting quarterback, there's just no way you can start CeeDee Lamb. If it's Andy Dalton, I think he is someone, it looks like a long shot for Dalton, but if it is in a deeper league, I might consider flexing him. But again, we're trying to avoid him at all costs. But Steph, let's go ahead and move over to another guy that's typically a slot receiver, Jarvis Landry. But now OBJ is out for the season with a torn ACL. What do we expect from Jarvis Landry moving forward, and are you willing to start him this week against the Vegas Raiders?
I am willing to start him this week just because I do think OBJ not being out there is a slight bump. I don't think it's as much of a bump as most people would think, with Hollywood Higgins emerging there, with Donovan Peoples-Jones actually showing out a little bit in this game. I know it was against Cincinnati, but Jarvis, he's only seeing 5.5 targets per game. Baker hasn't been throwing it a ton. Though the one glimmer of hope and why I'm willing to start Jarvis this week is just for how hot Baker looked in that Cincinnati game. If this is going to be kind of a emergence for Baker in the 2020 season, I mean, he had 18 straight completions. It was 7 for 7 on passes 10 yards or more downfield. So you look at some of that efficiency that Baker's having with this low pass volume. I think that's where Jarvis Landry can produce. You add it that, his expectation in terms of his workload, what they're going to ask him to do, is going to increase with OBJ out there. I think you look at Jarvis as a guy that, he put up 11 fantasy points. I think that goes up a little bit. Expect him in that 13 to 15 range. Doesn't have a high ceiling, but were we ever thinking of Jarvis Landry as a high ceiling, high upside guy? No, you really weren't. So he's a safe flex option if you need him this week. Safe, desperation wide receiver too. And you look at the matchup too. Las Vegas is the bottom 10 against wide receivers. So I think I am willing to flex him. How about you?
Yeah, I'm willing to flex him. It's, full season. I'm not, like you said, I'm not bumping him up dramatically because OBJ is out because of those 5.5 targets a game and Baker only attempting 28 passes a game. That offense's passing volume is just low. But if there was a game to start him, it's against the Raiders. They've been weak against the wide receiver. This Browns team is playing pretty well right now, at least the offense, as Baker is absolutely dealing. And the Raiders the Raiders have been involved in shootouts all season long. They're averaging 28 points a game, and they're giving up 32 points a game. So they're in these games. Like every time I turn on the TV on Sunday, I feel like the Raiders are in a back-and-forth battle. You got Nelson Aguilar running deep routes, becoming relevant again, and whoever they're going against is absolutely gashing their defense with big plays as well. They're a team that's made a bunch of big plays and has also given up a bunch of big plays, which is kind of the recipe for these shootouts. I expect that to continue. I think Jarvis Landry gives you a really solid floor this week, and if he's able to bust a big one for a touchdown, which he's not necessarily known for, but maybe they rely on him a little bit more with OBJ out, you have to buy into that narrative a little bit and at least see what happens out there. It could mean a big game. So I'm willing to start Jarvis Landry. Rest of season, I think he is a wide receiver 3, someone you can roll out there as your flex every single week, when before it was looking like he was kind of fading a little bit. So I'm not going to bump him up to something ridiculous. I'm not going to buy in too much, but he at least is moving up my board to where I feel a little bit more comfortable with him on a week in and week out basis.
Let's talk about one more wide receiver here, a guy that's emerged this year, and there could be some questions about how much longer he's going to be a guy in the starting lineup. We'll break it down here, but it's Travis Fulgham, practice squad legend for the Philadelphia Eagles. They're up against the Dallas Cowboys here in Week 8, which is just a gorgeous matchup. Right now, that game is slated to be played on Sunday Night Football. I hope they can flex that Ravens-Steelers game into the Sunday Night Football window. Otherwise, this Eagles-Dallas game this Sunday night is going to be a snoozer. Maybe I'll actually get to bed early for once. But right now, Dallas is 20.
Ben DiNucci is going to be having a rough one out there on Sunday Night Football in prime time. I can't even imagine what that's going to look like. Might be worse if it's Andy Dalton.
Well, the Cowboys are 25th against the wide receiver. Fulgham has been the wide receiver 1. He's been their alpha wide receiver for the last 3 weeks. 13, 10, and 11 targets the last 3 weeks. He's had touchdown on 3 of the 4 weeks he's played. So he's getting looked to in the red zone, in the end zone. Now, it hasn't been the highest efficiency, hasn't been the highest catch percentage, but he's getting some decent yards after the catch as well, averaging 10 to 15 yards per reception so far this season. So you look at the matchup, but then you look at the other things that are happening with these wide receivers in Philadelphia. We have Deshaun Jackson. He's on IR. He's out pretty much I think for the rest of the year. There's no way he can come back and at least be what he was. Alshon Jeffrey, they said he's unlikely to play, but he still might get in there, which I'm not worried about him. You can tell me if I'm wrong here in a minute. But Jalen Reagor could be coming back as well. Now, the question is, does Travis Fulgham still have fantasy value when Alshon Jeffrey and Jalen Reagor are back? We also have to keep in mind Greg Ward has been a guy that's been fighting for snaps, but you look at what Travis Fulgham did last week. He played on 96% of snaps. That was a season high. So that tells me, look, he's over Greg Ward in terms of a depth chart, in terms of how the Eagles want to get the ball in the hands of their playmakers. And for Fulgham, he's been a guy that they've played all around the formation. You think of Jalen Reagor, his skill set, and what they drafted him to be. He's an outside field stretcher. He's not going to be a slot guy. I think he actually does have the capability to be a guy who can play in the slot. I love Jalen Reagor as a prospect. He was one of my favorites coming into the year. But I think Travis Fulgham will still be out there in any 3 wide receiver sets. I think he's going to be a guy who's going to play in the slot a lot. And I think they're going to have to rely on him to make plays. So for all those reasons, you look at the matchup too. I'm willing to start Travis Fulgham against Dallas if I have to in my flex spot. Am I just out of my mind here, Alex? Are you with me?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I was wrong on Fulgham a few weeks ago. I said he might be like a 1-week plug and play off the waiver wire, and then he's out. He's proven me wrong, and he's another one, kind of like we talked about Chase Claypool, and our mindset last week was he's putting up numbers, he's putting up production, he's getting the snaps, he's getting the targets. If you get someone that's hot like that, you just have to go with it until they prove you wrong. And Claypool proved us wrong finally last week, so we're going to put him back on our bench, temper expectations. But last year, you look at A.J. Brown, he never proved you wrong. He kept putting up numbers again and again and again, and it got people a lot of wins. With Fulgham right now, he's getting the snaps. I mean, 96% of snaps last week, and then the last 3 weeks, double-digit targets in each game. The snaps are there. The targets are there. I don't care if Alshon's back. I don't care if Jalen Reagor's back. I don't care if the tight ends are back. To me, I'm finally at the point where I'm willing to start Fulgham until we see targets, snaps, and production come down, at least in my flex spot. So Carson Wentz is on fire right now. Believe it or not, these Eagles are leading that division, and they have this juicy matchup on Sunday Night Football against the Dallas Cowboys defense that's terrible. And the one thing that could be working against them is the Dallas Cowboys offense not putting up points because they might just be running the ball for the whole second half. So hopefully, whether it's deer in the headlights, Ben DiNucci, or historically bad primetime Andy Dalton, the Cowboys can put up some points to keep this game script positive for the Eagles passing game.
Yeah, fire up all your Boston Scott shares that you have. I think he's going to go nuts in this game. Expect 20-plus points from him. And he's a strong start. But speaking of strong starts, let's get into our Week 8 starts of the week, our favorite segment week in, week out. We're going to go quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. Both going to give you guys that maybe are on the bubble, maybe they're coming off bad games, maybe they have tough matchups, whatever it might be. We want to go and tell you, look, these guys might be on the bubble. Go ahead and plug them in there. Start them with confidence. So, Alex, I'll go ahead and let you start it off here. Who is your quarterback start of the week?
Yeah, before I get into it, Steph, we got to take a little victory lap for last week. We both did decent on our starts of the week. Had Matt Ryan, Matt Stafford. Neither took the top off, but they were fine in that game. You hit on Antonio Gibson, fantastic game. T. Higgins and Terry McLaurin both had good games. And the T.J. Hawkinson, big game in the last-second touchdown as well. So we hit on several last week. Didn't have any huge busts in there. I'd consider that one a win. So with that being said, let's keep the streak alive. Get into a guy we were just talking about, Carson Wentz and those Philadelphia Eagles with Travis Fulgham. I mean, they're playing Dallas. I said it, the matchup is as juicy as it can be. The Cowboys defense is giving up 34.7 points per game through 7 games this year. That's absolutely ridiculous. They're giving up 20.7 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. And man, Wentz struggled to start out the season. He got a lot of criticism, but he is heating up. You cannot put this Eagles record on Carson Wentz. Steph, over the past 5 weeks since those first 2 tough games, Carson Wentz is the QB3 in fantasy football with 24.7 points per game. He's been putting up numbers. He's been doing it with his legs as well, with a couple of rushing touchdowns. The Eagles have had to score points, and he's done it with no weapons. He's done it with Travis Fulgham and Boston Scott and Greg Ward. Now you're telling me that Jalen Reagor or Alshon Jeffrey could be coming back. Fingers crossed they're back for this game. But even if they're not, Carson Wentz is a must-start every week right now. And even season long, I mean, I know this is starts of this week, but you look forward, and once he gets Alshon, Reagor, eventually Dallas Goedert, Miles Sanders back in this lineup, some of the O-linemen as well, he's just going to continue to produce. So expect him to keep that hot streak going here in Week 8 against Dallas.
Nice. I love that one. Yeah, it's been throw some respect on Carson Wentz's name. Everyone was all off of the Wentz hype train. I think you can hop back on it now. But for me, my start of the week, it's coming off a hot game against Cleveland. It's Joe Burrow, who's up against the Tennessee Titans. They're 18th against the quarterback position. We talked about Joe Burrow a little bit at the top of the show and his production and what he's been doing for that offense. Then you have to plug him right back in. Really only had one start so far in his career where he hasn't had at least a startable fantasy game, and it was against Baltimore where you saw the matchup, the writing was on the wall. But in that game against Cleveland, 74% completion percentage on 47 attempts, 406 yards, and 3 touchdowns. You add in the sneaky rushing floor that Joe Burrow has as well. He's had 3 rushing touchdowns on the year. And the Tennessee Titans are giving up 19.6 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. Their defense is middle of the pack against the run, but very vulnerable against the pass. And what do we know that the Bengals want to do? It's throw the ball. Burrow's on pace for 670 pass attempts. That would have led the league in 2019. He averages 42 pass attempts per game, one of the highest in the league. He's leading the league in pass attempts, and he has the weapons group to do it and sustain that passing volume and be able to be relatively efficient with it. We know the Titans are going to put up points. They're top 5 in terms of points scored per game. So even if it's garbage time, Burrow is going to need to air it out, and I think that's going to lead to a good fantasy outing here in Week 8.
I like it. And Steph, it's time for some more spice because my running back start of the week is quite spicy. It's Le'Veon Bell going against the New York Jets.
Game.
The revenge game of all revenge games. And look, people are going to blow this narrative out of proportion and be like, oh my gosh, Le'Veon Bell is going to score, 30 points against the Jets. I'm not expecting some amazing top 10 running back performance, but I'm telling you, this is the week I think you can finally plug Le'Veon Bell into your starting lineup with the Chiefs. I know he only had 6 carries last week for 39 yards, only played 33% of snaps, but he had been with the team for like 3 days or 2 days because of some of the COVID protocols, and they were getting him worked in. It was a blowout game. I didn't expect a huge workload, but I did think he looked good in that game. His yards per carry was great. So looking forward to this week against the Jets. I expect, 40 to 50% of snaps in this game, and he could get 12 to 15 touches. I think he's a good bet to score a touchdown in this one as well. If he can get 8 to 10 carries that are efficient carries, a few catches and a touchdown, he could put up solid RB2 numbers this week against the Jets, who are a very weak defense. He's going to be begging Andy Reid all week long to get him in there for a touchdown. And I think it happens. And in a game where the Chiefs are supposed to absolutely dominate the Jets, I think even later on in that game, in the second half, if it's in hand, they could use this as time to really get Le'Veon Bell acclimated and get him going and get him some work. So I like Le'Veon Bell this week. I will say it is a bit risky. It's riskier than some of our other starts of the week, but I have Bell in a couple of leagues, and I'm wanting to fire him up just about everywhere.
Yeah, in garbage time, I feel like they're gonna feed Bell a little bit. That was closer than most would have thought to a 50-50 split. Now, that was kind of a weird game in the snow against Denver. There was, they were just trying to eat the clock out as fast as they could.
Yeah, DeAndre Washington got like 20% of carries.
Yeah, so I think Lev Bell is their RB2. He's now taking that Darrell Williams role, which we saw him get a decent amount of touches. We've seen Clyde Edwards-Helaire with multiple weeks near that 25 attempt range. I don't think he's going to hit that very much, if at all, for the rest of the season, unless Le'Veon Bell is out for whatever reason. So I think you can expect Lev Bell for double-digit touches, a few targets, probably a touchdown in this game. I love the pick there. And right now the Chiefs are 19.5-point favorites, 49-point over-under in this game. It's going to be nasty. So I want to get into my running back start of the week. You went with the super deep, spicy option. I'm going to go with the chalk option and say, plug this guy in there because I'm ready for an explosion. I think it's going to happen. It's Jonathan Taylor against the Detroit Lions.
Let's go.
Detroit is 28th against running backs. They're giving up 29 fantasy points a week to the running back position. On average, they give up 114 yards and more than one touchdown per week. Taylor is slowly improving as the season goes on. Over the last 2 games, he's getting closer to that 4.95 yards per carry number, which is exactly what we wanted to see from him. That's exactly the upside that he had and why he was drafted early in the second round. And he's still seeing that steady passing work from Phillip Rivers, the checkdown king himself. Because right now, Jonathan Taylor's 11th amongst running backs in receiving yards, and he's outside of the top 10 in reception. So he's been efficient. He's averaging over 3 red zone touches a game, 20 total on the season, which is top 15 amongst running backs. Expect a blow-up game from Jonathan Taylor here in Week 8.
I love it. I think it's time coming out of that bye week. I think they could really use him to kind of carry the load. Phillip Rivers hasn't looked great, so I love that pick, Steph. I certainly hope he has a huge game for my Colts against a stingy and a tough Detroit Lions team. But let's go ahead and move on to the wide receiver position. Mine's a little bit more chalk, but I just want to give people some reassurance in this guy. It's Robert Woods. And very, very disappointing game last week, but it was a tough matchup against the Chicago Bears. And I know Robert Woods, even before last week, hadn't quite lived up to the expectations where people drafted him. So a lot of people were kind of on the fence with him after another bad game. Some people are going to be out on him. Some people are going to try to be trading him or benching him. You got to roll him out there. I think he is still an every week start, especially against the Miami Dolphins. He's still seeing a huge snap share. I mean, this guy is out there essentially all the time. And before this week, he's been fairly consistent with his production as well. On top of the snaps, he's seeing touches in a really good offense, 6.5 targets a game and 2 carries a game this year. He's going to continue to be involved as their wide receiver 1. So with the Dolphins this week, I know it's Tua's first start, but I expect the Rams to dominate this game. I expect them to get back to their guy, Robert Woods, and get him involved, get him going a little bit coming off of the down week. So if he burned you last week, don't worry, don't panic. Plug him right back in against Miami. I think he's going to have a really nice game.
Nice. I like that start of the week there.
Bobby Trees.
He's always a good, bounce back guy. He's just the classic, just steady, solid wide receiver too. You gotta love it. Now I'm going to go a little bit spicier for my wide receiver start of the week. Yes, we're trading here with running back and wide receiver. Mine is Brandon Ayuk. For those who don't know, he is a rookie wide receiver for the San Francisco 49ers. He's up against Seattle this week, which is a fantastic matchup, the second highest over-under on the week. Seattle is dead last in the NFL amongst wide receivers. On average, they give up 60 points a game to the wide receiver position.
Wow.
And Deebo Samuel's now set to miss multiple weeks with a hamstring injury. And we look at what Brandon Ayuk did just last week against New England. He led the team in targets, more than George Kittle. He caught 6 for 7, had 115 yards, 19.2 yards per reception. And Ayuk has played more than 70% of snaps every single week so far in his career. He's coming off his first 100-yard game. And you look at how he's being used in this offense. His average depth of target is 10.4 to Deebo Samuel's 2.8. Even though you might look at the box score and see, hey, these guys are pretty similar. They got pretty similar yardage totals, similar targets and receptions. But where Ayuk is being used is as a traditional X receiver that's going downfield. On top of that, you get the floor from the volume, the usage, really being the number 2 to Kittle on that team now. We've seen when Shanahan wants to get a guy active in a game, whether it's Jeff Wilson, Jerick McKinnon, whoever it might be, they're going to have a good game. That's just what Shanahan has given us. I expect that to remain the same here against Seattle. But lastly here, where Ayuk gets some additional upside is how he's been used as a rusher. So far this season, he's already scored 2 touchdowns off rushing attempts. So you add in that extra touch or 2 that he may get. I think there's just plenty of upside for Ayuk, who's going to be the go-to X on this San Francisco 49ers team. Plug him in a great matchup.
Nice. I love that pick, Steph. Now we're going to get into these tight ends. Tight end is brutal, man, and these are so deep. So, if you have someone that's, like a Hunter Henry or, there's obviously the big 5. Is it 5? Kelsey.
Yeah, let's just name them. Let's just name them all. I mean, it's we know who we're starting. Kittle, Kelsey, Waller, Andrews, Jonnu Smith,
Start him
TJ
every
Hawkinson,
week.
Hunter Henry.
Even Noah Fant.
Now we get into
I think Noah Fant is a every week start at this point.
What about Gronk?
I think you start Gronk. You still want to start Gronk every week. He's putting up numbers right now.
One more. Jared Cook.
I think if you don't have any of those other, if you don't have any of the other names we just mentioned, and you only have Cook, I think he is still an auto start. But after that, I do think it ends. So I'm going to go ahead and get into my guy. This one's deep. It's Irv Smith Jr. against the Green Bay Packers.
Nice.
And this is a guy out of Alabama who is hyper athletic. We've all been excited for him for a while, and I'm surprised he hasn't broken out yet. But he actually, under the radar, has been steadily climbing in terms of snaps, in terms of targets the last couple weeks. And if this guy breaks out, you do not want to miss the boat. You want to get ahead of it early, because if this breakout actually happens, he's one of those guys that could be a league winner, almost like Kittle the year that he broke out. And look, this matchup against Green Bay is a matchup where we expect Cousins to throw the ball. The Packers' offense is elite. Their defense is pretty good, but their offense is elite. The Vikings aren't going to be able to run the ball, 40 times like they probably want to. So Cousins is going to throw. And look, these snap counts for Irv Smith just pop off the page. I know Kyle Rudolph is there as well, but Smith in his last 2 games, 68% and 79% of snaps. He saw 5 targets in each of those games. He's one of these athletic tight ends that can take any play to the house, which is what you really want. Jason Witten, all-time legend, his style of play was like, let me get a bunch of targets, consistent, steady possession production, where you see Noah Fant, you see George Kittle, you see even Evan Ingram, these guys who can take any target for 75 yards for a touchdown because of their speed and athleticism. Irv Smith fits that category. He's super athletic and can take anything the distance. So only a couple of targets could go a really long way for this guy. And again, the tight end options are so limited. You gotta take your shots. Shoot or shoot, go for it. Steph, I know you're probably rolling out Irv Smith against me this week. I sadly love that play. So, if he doesn't break out, I'm not going to be super upset. But if he does, you heard it here first.
Yeah, that Blake Jarwin, Ian Thomas stack at the start of the year just absolutely crushed me. And it's been grasping at straws, but maybe Irv Smith is that guy. And if I didn't have Irv Smith, I'd want to throw in my start of the week, Robert Tonyan for the Green Bay Packers up against Minnesota in that very same game. I'm expecting a top 12, a tight end 1 performance from Robert Tonyan, who's right now sitting at the tight end 9. I know that was skewed by Davante Adams being out for a number of weeks, but Vikings are middle of the road against the tight end. The Vikings defense has been absolutely terrible this season. Really plays to your Irv Smith point even more. And the over-under is the 3rd highest this week at 52.5. In a blowout against the Houston Texans, Robert Tonyan played a season-low 51% of snaps last week. They just didn't need him. And the game before that, Green Bay got blown out by Tampa Bay. So it's been these one-sided game scripts in both directions since Davante Adams has come back after that Packers bye week. I just don't know how long Adams can sustain 16 or 17 targets a game. And unless Adams is going to see 200 targets so far on the season, which, hot take, that could still happen, I expect the ball to be spread out a little bit more. And when I look at the pecking order for the Green Bay Packers, to me it goes Davante Adams, Aaron Jones, and then Robert Tonyan. Maybe you make a case for Marquez Valdes-Scantling, but I'd rather go Tonyan there. So I'm expecting a solid start this week from Baby Kittle. If he's on your roster, you probably needed tight end help anyway, so I think you can go ahead and plug Robert Tonyan back in after a really down week. Well, that's it for our starts of the week. Hell of an episode here, Alex. That was an absolute blast. I'm excited for this week 8. Been hitting on some DFS lineups too. But guys, if you like what we're doing here on the show, a subscribe would be greatly appreciated. Making a push right now. Just hit 2.3K. Feels great. And a like is always appreciated. Again, if you have start-sit questions, hit us with those down in the comments below. You can also hit us up on Twitter at WMoveSport. And Alex, before we sign off here, anything else?
One last thing I want to add, and this is just like a strategy tip of the week. You said it when we first kicked off the episode, Steph. You have to find out what side of the hump you're on in your league. Are you fighting for survival, or are you at the top, 5-2, 6-1, even 7-0, looking like you're locked for the playoffs with a good team? And if you're at the top, this is the time of the year where there's going to be desperate teams at the bottom of the standings that haven't totally given up yet. So think about a team that's 2-5 or 3-4. Now is when you want to take advantage of trades with those teams, because they might have guys that are on the Jaguars, Texans, Cardinals, or the Washington football team on bye this week, and they need a win to stay alive. So target the team with Terry McLaurin on bye, and maybe you can find someone on your bench that's your wide receiver or your wide receiver 3 or a running back 3 or something that you can flip or package together because they need starters and they need wins, and you just want a guy you can stash on your bench. So look out for those kind of things in your leagues. Target some of those players on bye that might be on teams that are fighting for survival, and you might be able to flip a pretty good deal for yourself in the long term. So I'm definitely going to be doing that in my leagues because I am fortunately with a winning record in the couple of the leagues that I'm in this season. But just a good strategy tip to throw out there, because these middle weeks are where you can really set yourself up for the playoffs.
We'll have to look back once we hit this midway point after this week 8 and see how things have shaken out so far this year. So much fun to watch with these rookies. I feel like this has been a really high-scoring year. There's a lot of great matchups for fantasy. But guys, thank you all so much for listening and watching, and we'll see you next time. Peace.
Peace.